Hello, you are listening to Just Films and That. This is the podcast where we talk about films we think might be underrated or underseen. I'm the host, Josh Hallam, and I'm joined, as ever, by my co-host, Alice Oliver. It was her turn to pick this week, and she chose I, Tonya from 2017. So, let's see what we think. Alice, I, Tonya.
Mm-hmm.
You,
I, Tonya.
You, Alice.
I, Tonya. Hiya.
Yeah, hiya.
You're right. You're right,
And that's
Tonya.
the best joke of the episode. See you next
Nailed
week.
It early.
So, I, Tonya from 2017. Spoiler warnings if you've not seen it. Alice, tell the listeners at home a little bit about what I, Tonya is about and why you picked it.
So, I, Tonya is a biographical sports film about ice skater Tonya Harding and is presented to the audience as being somewhat true, but states that it is mostly based on contradictory interviews with Tonya and ex-husband Jeff. The film explores Tonya's relationship with skating, her family, and Jeff, with a key focus later on in the film on Tonya's connection to the 1994 assault on her rival Nancy Kerrigan, which subsequently ended Tonya's career. We've got Margot Robbie as Tonya, Sebastian Stan as Jeff, and Alison Janney as Tonya's mum. So that is what the film is about, essentially. Why did I pick it? So I don't think that it's underrated as an entity, right? Mm-hmm. I do think there's perhaps an argument in here that it is a little bit underseen with the masses, because I just can't imagine many people are seeking this out to watch, and it isn't one of those that's ever come up in conversation, in my circles at least. But so Margot Robbie was nominated for a few awards for this, and she won a couple of smaller awards from smaller sort of awarding bodies, but none of the big ones, not the Oscars, not BAFTA, not anything.
She wasn't even nominated?
Yeah, she was nominated, but she didn't win anything.
Right.
And I think that's a real, real shame. So I think she is outstanding in this. And you see such a range from her that you perhaps don't expect to see from her, given the sort of films that she'd been in before and that she'd been in since. So I feel like a real disservice has been done there. And I'm seeking justice for Margot Robbie to get the appreciation she deserves.
She needs all the support.
I
think the thing is with Margot Robbie, she's had a quiet year, hasn't she? So she needs all the support she can get from the likes of us.
I mean, a lot of people don't even know who she is, I mean, she's just this young girl from Australia, and it's like, Margot who? Do you know what I mean? So I'm here to shine the spotlight on Margot Robbie this year, 2023, which is something she definitely needs.
She does need it.
But again, I feel like very easy to sort of dismiss her acting abilities when looking at the surface at the sort of films that she does get cast in. And I think this just showed like a completely different side and a different ability from her that I think could be more appreciated. But I do think also it's a little bit underseen. Ultimately, I do think maybe I just wanted to talk about this one as well. So, like I said, part of the reason is seeing Margot Robbie in this light and really seeing what she's made of and what she can bring to the screen. But also, as a sports film, you just don't get that many sports films about women. So few. I Googled it, and I'd heard of about 2 of them.
Yeah, I can only think
rest...
of $1 Million Baby.
Bend It Like Beckham.
Bend It Like Beckham. What's the baseball one with Madonna and Gina Davis in it and Tom Hanks?
Oh my God. No idea.
It's not Field of Dreams. It's something.
No, not Field.
It's not. But it's the baseball one with Madonna and Gina Davis and Tom Hanks in it, which has completely gone out of my head. It's not even like it's a little known film. It's just gone out of my head. You're absolutely right. There isn't that many sports films about women. It's all men all the time.
All men, all the time. So I wanted to come look at it, analyze it, bring it to the masses, bring it to you, Josh. So had you seen this one before?
I had seen this one before.
Oh,
I'd seen it before, and I'd enjoyed it before. Yeah,
okay,
so
great.
I had seen it. So one of my memories is I've got 2 memories that are sort of associated with this film. Number one, obviously Margot Robbie. I don't think it would be unfair to say is known for being beautiful and attractive, right? So when she was cast in this, obviously she spends a lot of time in heavy makeup and stuff like that. There was a lot of clickbait. You won't believe,
right? You won't believe what Margot looks like.
You won't believe
now,
what Margot, all that sort of all that bollocks. Who'd have thought that professional makeup artists could make someone look like another person? Because it was the same when she did the one with Saoirse Ronan where she played Queen Elizabeth. There's another one that's like, you won't believe who this is, you know, that sort of thing. So I remember that. And the other thing I remember is watching it. So every year when the awards season comes around, I always try my best to watch all of the films that have
That's good.
a buzz
That's a good
about
thing.
them. Obviously, there's a lot of them, but I try my best. I usually get through at least 4 or 5 if I can. And this was one of them that particular year. And I remember watching it thinking she was quite unlucky not to win more acting accolades. And I think that the one of the reasons she didn't, it was just a particularly strong year for acting.
Yeah.
So if you look at the year that this came out, around the award sessions, you've got Shape of Water, 3 Billboards at Ebbing, Missouri, Call Me By Your Name, Lady Bird, Phantom Thread, The Post, and Dunkirk, amongst others, that all had quite strong reactions, particularly sort of 3 Billboards and Shape of Water and Phantom Thread for acting. So I think Frances McDormand won the year that she won.
Yeah.
And when I saw that, I thought, well, it's not that she's better; it's just also really, really good. So it's not it's not like someone won for something that you think, you know, every now and then films win Oscars and you're like, oh yeah,
what the hell just happened?
So anyway, so yes, I had seen it before and had enjoyed it before. So let's get stuck into what we like then. So you've already touched on some of the stuff there, but let's elaborate. What else did you like about I, Tonya? What do you like about I, Tonya?
So, obviously, in general, I like films that are based on true events, and I like sports films. And I think that this is an excellent example of both of those things coming together. So, I really like the way the film blends the documentary style with your standard cinematic storytelling. So, you get sequences that play out like a standard film, which will then eventually get interrupted by an interview or a voiceover or some archive footage or something like that. And I think the film got the balance just right when it came to kind of expressing these two different types of storytelling. And I really like the way that the interviews with the key characters are shot and framed. And I found that these were really engaging and they gave the viewers an opportunity to really connect with Tonya, I think, in a much more significant way than you would have if those interviews weren't there. So I think it was really smart to include those and just a really good decision.
So that's something I want to ask you about, actually, which is funny. So what this film used, like you say, it's based on testimony, and it does. I think it's quite clear that it's based on perspective and people's accounts. It's not meant to be. This is definitely what happened. It's what they say happened, right? So they employ unreliable narrators, don't they? So you've got Lavonda, who is Alice and Janney, you've got Tonya, and you've got Jeff, who are the 3 main ones, also interspersed with interviews with them as older and younger and all that sort of stuff. Can you think of what film might have influenced that?
Oh my gosh. Oh no, is this really obvious?
What other film have we done that has an example of unreliable narration that is said to have invented that in film?
Oh my God. Oh, Rashomon.
Yeah, that's what I was watching it. I was like, oh my God. So when we were trying to think of examples of the Rashomon effect when we did it, it's this. That's what it is. It's in this. So yeah, I just thought that was interesting. I really like the narration as well because sometimes I think they say narration can be lazy, but in this, because it's so rooted in accounts and perspective, I think it really works. And I particularly like how they use narration to keep the pace up by doing things like having them speak in the action rather than over the top. So sometimes they'll be like, you know, there's bits, isn't there, where Jeff and Tonya have quite a volatile relationship to each other, but particularly Jeff is obviously violent towards Tonya. But there's bits in it where he says something happened and she'll just be like, this didn't happen to the camera and stuff like that. And I thought that was really, you know, I remember thinking at the time, but yeah, really enjoyed that part of it as well. What else?
So I think pretty much all of the performances here are really strong, with Margot Robbie clearly carrying the film throughout. And there are moments in this film where she looks awful, which is just in such stark contrast to how we're used to seeing her. And I think she shows brilliant range in her emotions, and she's actually doing a lot of the ice skating as well. Yeah. So she's giving a great physical performance, and that's obviously really impressive. And it all just feels like so different from most other films that I've seen her in. So I also think Alice and Janney is terrific.
Who did win the Oscar.
She did win the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress, yeah. So she does a terrific job at playing the abusive and just horrendous mum character. And she has some of the best moments in this film because the dialogue that has been written for her when she's speaking to Tonya is absolutely savage. The insults and the abuse that she hurls at her are some of the most exquisitely cruel things I think I've ever heard anyone say in a film, especially in the context of this coming from a mum to her daughter. And because the film is also a comedy at times, sometimes her mum would be saying really awful things, but then like a really fun song would be playing in the background.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was like this weird
Do you
juxtaposition
have
of feelings going
favorite
on.
Lavender line? I've got a favorite Lavender line. Do you
Go
have,
on, you tell me yours.
So
I
mine
can't
is,
really
and this
remember
has
them
got
verbatim.
so obviously we do swear on this podcast, but this has got a particularly bad swear word in it. So cut forward 30 seconds if you don't want to hear it. But the bit where she's swearing at the ice rink when Tonya's little, and someone says, "Can you not swear in front of the children?" She goes, "I'm not swearing." Then just goes, "You cunt," under her breath like that. Oh, it's because the thing. What? Go on. What's your favorite? What's your favorite? I almost said the thing is, and then went off on one. Then what's your favorite?
It's all right. No, you go off on one. No, to be honest, I can't remember any verbatim. I just remember.
So what I wanted to say, just to pick up
wonderful.
on her performance, she is absolutely outstanding. I mean, there are outstanding performances in this. I'll come back to Margot Robbie, but Alison Janney. So she always understands the assignment. She's always brilliant in like whatever she does, whether that's voicing a starfish in Finding Nemo or being, an abusive mother in this, or she's brilliant in some other films we've done and stuff like that. So she's so good in this. And I think there's a lot going on for her, particularly because you're seeing it from Tonya's point of view and her point of view, which means you have to like her and hate her.
Mm-hmm.
And she nails it, because I find myself, she does these horrible things. She has these biting comments towards her own daughter. And yet I couldn't help like her in places. And that must be so difficult to get that balance right. And obviously the testament to the script as well. But she is so, she's so good in this film. I think it's a fantastic performance.
Yeah, and I think what you said there, to get that balance, because throughout you do feel the undercurrent of her just being absolutely desperate for her daughter to succeed. But the sad thing is that she's willing to do anything to make that happen, which in this instance is hurling abuse at her, making her feel less than she is.
Paying a guy to be horrible to her.
Yes, exactly. And completely destroying her self-esteem because she thinks that is the thing that's going to motivate Tonya, as opposed to love and support and, creating a nice environment for her to grow up in. But it also suggests, and the impression I get from her as well, is that she had a shit time growing up and she probably had a very volatile relationship with her parents. So whereas like with Jeff, so I hate Jeff. I hate him so much. To me, he is just not redeemable whatsoever. Like, I'm just furious every time he's on screen. But with the mum, there's something else there. Like, she is a little bit more redeemable, and you feel like all that cruelty and all that anger is actually coming from somewhere, and you can almost sympathize with her. But with Jeff, he just comes across as an absolute monster dickhead, and I don't have any nice feeling towards him at all. But all the characters are so complex in that way, and feel like there's just so much going on, and they're so compelling as well. Like, all of them, like you're desperate to know more, sort of thing.
Even Sebastian Stan as Jeff as well. I think he is. I think he's quite an underrated actor, because obviously most people will know him as the Winter Soldier, but he has done other films where he's actually stretched his acting muscles and stuff. I think he's pretty good in this, because I think he does a good job of the biggest strength he has in this for me is the difference between young and old Jeff. Because he's not old, is he? He's sort of middle-aged. He's sort of in his 40s or 50s or whatever.
Yeah.
And I thought he was really good in it. But there's some fantastic performances in this. So Margot Robbie, then, do you think she deserved the Oscar?
So I haven't seen Three Billboards, so
Right.
I can't. So I don't know. But all I know is that. So watching that film, watching I, Tonya, I felt completely and fully emotionally invested in that person, in that character, in a way that I haven't really felt about a character in a film for some time. And like, I'm just hooked, and I want to, you're rooting for her and you want to know more and all this. And I think to be able to convey that through the screen, obviously with the help of certain cinematic techniques and sounds and stuff, but I think it was flawless. Like, I think she was flawless in it.
I've got that word written down, exact word.
Yeah.
So what I've got written down here is the bit at the end with the sentencing is pretty flawless. So obviously she has a lot to do, but the bit at the end where, obviously we've already done spoilers, and it's based on true life, but the judge it basically hands her a ban, a lifetime ban from, competitive ice skating. And she does this monologue about how I have no education, I can't do anything else. I would rather you're basically giving me a life sentence when I'd rather do 18 months in prison, and she would have done less because she had less involvement. And obviously, that's what they do, isn't it? Doesn't she say they only got 18 months? I'd rather do the
ones
jail
who
time.
actually did it, who actually hit her.
And it's just, I mean, it's so hard to watch that, but in a, and I mean that in a compelling and sort of in a positive way for the filmmakers and for Margot Robbie as well. But I think she's brilliant in this, and that bit is, for me, if I was going to say, and this is why, I'd show you that 2-minute monologue in that bit at the end.
Yeah, it's crushing. And you feel it, and all through the film, because of her performance and just the way that the film progresses, using the various cinematic techniques and stuff, and including the aspects of the documentary format, you just feel all this emotion, this anger, this frustration. All of it is just building up all the way through the film. So when it climaxes with that, you're as crushed as she is, or I was anyway. And then there's that, there's a funny little bit at the end where she's like, oh yeah, so I became a boxer sort of thing. And that sort of softens it a little bit, because then you see, she still gets to do something. She's got an outlet and all that. But you feel so much for all these characters, so much, whether it's good feelings or bad feelings.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that, actually. So that leads into, and it talks about how she's treated and stuff like that. What did you sort of take from the film in terms of what the message was and what the point was, or did you just take it of this is just this is a telling of the story?
I didn't fully absorb it as just a telling of the story, because of the different perspectives, and because it is like the filmmakers just sort of, the impression you get is that they're just trying to piece together something from the different bits of information that we get, but everyone's going to have their own idea of how things went down. In terms of message, I don't really know. There's a bit about class in there. There's a bit about there's a bit about abuse and domestic violence and stuff, but also ambition and just kind of raw human emotion and what that can do to someone. Kind of a lot, really. So I'm not sure if I could pinpoint it. Why? What were your thoughts on that?
So I think there's 2 big points here, which is it's and they're intertwined. It is classism. It's classism, and I think it's also about how the media treats people and sensationalizes people. So there's a really interesting, pointed thing at the end where, so all through it. Now, I'd be interested to know if someone who's watched this, who was around at the time, obviously we were around at the time, but we were very young, who would remember, being in the absolute furor of it, remember it being in all the papers, and the way that they follow her around and berate them and just writing about Tonya and Jeff and all this thing, to the point where at one point she says, I was the most hated woman in America, and she's 23.
Yeah, and that journalist says, doesn't he, like, oh yeah, we would tow her car and slash her tires so that she had to come out, stuff like that.
And it reminded me, I was trying to think of an example of things that have happened in this country, because our press obviously have a reputation for or they certainly did if you think about things like when David Beckham got sent off in the World Cup and people were hanging effigies of him, or if you think about just the general treatment of particularly reality stars 10, 15 years ago, my mind's drawn to particularly like Jay Goody and stuff like that, when it was just everywhere, and everything they did, they were, if they put on weight, if they lost weight, if they got married, if they got divorced, if they were seen going into a shop that was too expensive, if they were seen going into a shop that was too cheap, all this stuff. And I think it was a bit of a comment on sensationalism in the press, particularly if you look at, there's a bit at the end where, when it's all done and dusted, she looks at the telly and it's O.J. Simpson getting arrested. And I think that's and they'll move on to the next. And they'll move on to the next. I think that's an interesting point. But classism as well, because there's a big point in this, which is that she pretty much says objectively at one point she's the best in the world. She's the best female figure skater in the world, which would probably make her the best figure skater in the world, full stop. But she can't get the scores that she's needed because of her presentation. But her presentation, what they mean by that is that she's not seen as being refined and the way that the judges want her to be. And she confronts them and stuff like that. And there's a lot of stuff in there about how she's seen as what they would call like a redneck and stuff like that. And I thought that was interesting, that idea of class. She's the best in the world, but she's held back because she's not seen as refined. Well, in that case, it's not competitive then, is it? Because if there's no competitive nature to if you have money or not. Is there? Do you know what I mean? There's no competition if you already come from that background, which you would pretty much have to because of the age at which they start in the sport and stuff like that. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that because I thought that was interesting because it's definitely a comment on classism, and I think it's also definitely a comment on treating these people like products.
Yeah. The devastating thing about it is as well is that the fact that she did not come from much and the fact that she is who she is and where she's from, surely that's more impressive that she can compete with these people that are from, affluent, well-off families and stuff who can, we can easily afford to send them to classes and for them to train all day. But her mum had to work as a waitress doing all the hours under the sun. And then she had to get a job. And that's more impressive. That's more impressive than if a rich person just like swans out there. It's like, oh yeah, I've been skating since I was a kid. We had our own private ice rink or whatever it might be, sort of thing. So yeah, it's devastating. And you really feel that. I think you really feel it. And you feel it for her. And you feel it for everybody who's gone through that.
Okay, so we'll move on to the dislikes then, and we'll see if there's anything we would change or that we didn't like about I, Tonya. Is it that it's not iRobot? Could be.
I mean, that's it. That's number one on my list.
Yeah, they are in they are linked. If people listen at home, no, they're not. Alice, is there anything you didn't like or anything you would change? I've got a couple of bits, but what have you got?
So I wasn't really a huge fan of the moments where the characters, mostly Tonya, break the fourth wall. So just to be clear, I'm not talking about the interviews where the characters are looking into the camera, but it's the moments where you'd be watching a sequence of the main narrative play out, and mostly Tonya would turn to the camera to comment on what we're seeing, basically to comment on the scene.
That's what I mentioned before, like this never happened, that sort of thing.
Yeah, but she'd turn to the camera and say like, oh no, this isn't how it went, or oh yeah, he used to do this to me all the time, or whatever it was. And I found this a little bit jarring at times, and I feel like it took the drama and the seriousness out of some of the scenes. However, because this film is also considered a black comedy, I sort of understand that perhaps it's using those moments to kind of make those bits a little bit funny. And to keep some of it light and to keep it within that comedy genre. Otherwise it is just a heartbreaking tragedy. But I personally felt like I could have done without that, and it didn't really do it for me, those moments. And just one other thing, and this isn't something that I didn't like as such, but it is something I noticed, and I wonder if other people could possibly have a problem with it. And that's that a lot of the characters around Tonya don't seem to really have many redeemable qualities and do just mostly come across as bad, shitty people. Now, I can see that on paper, you would perhaps call for more balance in that instance, instead of it just being all about, oh yeah, Tonya did this bad thing, but here's why, so we understand her as a person sort of thing. So I didn't mind it personally, and obviously the film's called I, Tonya, so it is about her, and she's the central character, and it's her story. And it would be impossible, obviously, to dedicate appropriate screen time to each individual character to get their whole backstory. But maybe just a little bit more in places. Like I said before, I hate Jeff. I hate him so much.
Proper hate Jeff, don't you?
He makes me angry. Like, he makes me so angry the way he treats her. And I wonder if, just for balance sake, they just needed to drop something in there of like, oh yeah, but his dad used to beat him mercilessly when he was a kid, and this is why he's like that. A little bit more context. Maybe just a little something. Okay. But that was it. That was honestly it. Overall, thoroughly impressed by this film. What about you? Anything you didn't like or you would change?
Well, just to counteract, I didn't mind that bit of the narration. I quite liked it. I felt like they used it to keep you engaged, because I think otherwise you would have it's quite a specific story, isn't it? So I think one of the things that's good is that when you have a film that's got quite specific subject matter, I think you have to do things like that to keep people engaged. If you think of the way The Damned United skips in time, it's not linear and stuff like that. I think that's to its strength, but I can also understand that people might think it's a bit lazy script writing, or that it's just not for them. It's quite it's a swing, isn't it, to do something like that, and often stuff like that doesn't pay off. For me, couple of bits, but nothing massive. So the first one, I think there's a couple of pacing issues. Okay. So it is a 2-hour film, and I think there's bits where it does really slow down and feel like it's building to something, and then I think it dips a little bit in the middle. So I think it's strong. I think it starts really well, finishes really well. And I think the sort of maybe it's about 2/3 of the way in, it dips a little bit in pace, particularly around everything that's going on with the act itself, with the incident, as they call it in this. I think there might actually be a bit too much of that. I don't think we needed that much of it, but I think also they're in a bit of a rock and a hard place, because I think the director would know going into it that that's what people are expecting it to cover. You know, it's the defining moment of her career and of her life. So if they didn't cover it, but I think there's a lot of the build up to it, what happened to it, the investigation into it and stuff like that. But actually I was more interested in Tonya and her as a person. There's the odd bit, the other thing as well is obviously Margot Robbie's doing a lot of the skating, but she's not doing all of the skating. There is the odd bit where it's not her, where I feel like you can see her face on someone else's body. But I don't know if that's just because I know it's not her. Do you know what I mean? I mean, at the end of the day, it's not a criminal offense. It's just something that I noticed. So that's all that I dislike. But something I did want to ask you in this section was that one of the criticisms I saw about this film was that, based on what actually happened, that it is too sympathetic to Tonya. I'm not, you might be, but I'm not an expert on what actually happened. So let's just say that up front, that I don't really know much about the incident itself, and there's a lot around it to read. So I haven't done that. Do you know much about the incident?
No, nothing at all. I didn't know who Tonya Harding was until I watched this film.
So do you feel that it's too sympathetic to her, or do you feel like, because my opinion would be it's a perspective piece. So it's going, this is what she says happened. So it's not sympathetic. It's trying to be more. It's trying to be almost objectively subjective. It's trying to be like, this is what they say happened. What do you think?
I mean, the problem is that depends on what the truth is. Like, if the truth is that she wanted someone to anonymously send death threats to her, and that was it, then that's, that's not great, but that's not sending someone to debilitate someone and break their knee, is it? Whereas if the truth is, the plan all along was to get someone to seriously injure Nancy, and that was always the plan, and she was in on it, well then, in that case, it is too sympathetic on her. But is that what happened? Does anyone know definitively what happened? What are the facts?
I suppose I even think, almost regardless of that, it's what the point of the film is. It's what she says happens. So obviously it's going to be sympathetic.
Yeah, and the film starts very clearly by saying this film has been constructed by interviews with two very unreliable and people who, like, that their accounts of things do not match up, sort of thing. So you go into it knowing that. But also, ultimately, I mean, she gets hers, for fuck's sake. Like, she gets a lifetime ban of skating and has to go and become a boxer. So, I mean, is it sympathetic? Maybe, but it doesn't make her life any better. Like, it's been and gone sort of thing, doesn't it? So I don't know. It completely depends what the truth is and what actually happened.
Okay, then let's move on to talking about the critical reception. And now I haven't seen the critical reception. Obviously, you've sort of picked it as you want to talk about it, but I think there's also an element of it could be underrated or underseen, maybe. I mean, I know that this did well when it came out. It was nominated for not just acting awards; it was nominated for multiple awards. So I would say, what would I give it? I think this is it's probably a solid 7.5 out of 10. Okay. Something like that. I think it actually probably did a little bit better than that critically. So I think you're probably looking at a bit of a difference between the critics and the audience. I would say the critics are probably you're talking 8s to low 8s, and I think critics with the audience you're looking low 7s. That's what I'm going to say. So I'm going to say average it out, maybe 7.5, which is what I'd give it, appropriately rated. I would probably, I don't know how it did at the box office, but I would imagine probably not that well. If thinking about when it came out and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm gonna say it's probably appropriately rated and it's probably underseen. But go on, what we talking here?
Okay, so on IMDb at the time of recording, it gets 7.5 out of 10.
Okay,
and then over on Rotten Tomatoes, the audience give it 88%, and then the critics give it 90%.
Oh wow! So I was wrong.
So the IMDb score for me is definitely underrated. So for me, this is this is an 8.5 film, maybe a high 8 sort of
Right.
film, so maybe 8.7, 8.8 sort of thing. In terms of the box office, so its budget was $11 million, which just doesn't feel like anything at all. And it made 58 million. So it obviously made multiples back of its budget, but that, I don't know if it's just because of how films are nowadays and because Marvel and whatever has ruined our perception of money, but that just doesn't feel like a huge amount.
No, it doesn't.
58 mil, does it?
No, it doesn't. So that averages out to just above 84. That's what those scores average out.
Interesting.
Yeah, so for me, based on those scores, I would probably say, I said 7.5. That's what I would give it, but I'm not hearing 84 and thinking that's ridiculous. It's a well-made film, so I'd say I'm happy to say that's appropriately rated and underseen. That's what I reckon. Okay. What do you think?
So I genuinely think for me that is a tiny bit underrated.
They're underrated.
Obviously only a tiny bit. I know that 84 is an incredible score and that 90 from the critics is amazing.
Yeah, that's good.
But I do think this is a high 8 film. That audience score, 88, that's probably where I'm sitting on that Rotten Tomatoes audience score. So I think a little bit underrated, but more than happy to concede that it's appropriately rated because I appreciate how high those scores are. I particularly like this film.
Let's put the underrated argument out there to the audience. So we'll say it is underseen. We think it's underseen, and then we'll put that out to a vote and see what people think. Is I, Tonya underrated? Well, there we go. Another episode in the bag, underseen, and we're not sure on the rating. We'll put that out to you guys. So lucky you. You get to decide. Is I, Tonya underrated? We will be back next week with another film to talk about because it is Halloween. So we'll leave it as a little bit of a surprise for you out there. You like a surprise, don't you, Alice? You don't even know.
I love surprises. Literally my favourite things.
So we'll be back next week with another episode. If you'd like to get in touch with us, it's filmsandthatpod@gmail.com. Please do drop us an email if you've got any film suggestions. We're also on Patreon, so if you'd like to support us, get extra content, ad-free episodes, access to things a day early, stuff like that, heading over to patreon.com/justfilmsandthat. The link is in the episode description. Loads of stuff over there. Any support you can give us is massively appreciated. We're on social media as well, so do feel free to give us a follow. Search for Just Films and That wherever you get your old socials, and we'll probably be on there. And we're on the television as well, aren't we, Alice?
We are indeed. Every Friday from 6 p.m, you can find us on the local TV network. So if you live in Birmingham, Bristol, Leeds, Liverpool, or the northeast of England, you can find us on Channel 7 on Freeview. Or if you live in North Wales or South Wales, you can find us on Channel 8 on Freeview. I'm also uploading all the videos to Dailymotion, so if you head on over there and search for Just Films and That, you'll be able to see exactly what it is that we're up to. That's me and Josh talking about all our favourite underrated and underseen films.
Yes, lots of ways to see us, hear us, get in touch with us, engage with us, and all that stuff. But as ever, thank you very much for listening. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye from me. Cheerio!
Bye!